Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'll give you a very whirlwind tour through Productivity Alberta this afternoon. Usually my bio ends saying the most important thing, and that's that I'm the mother of a 12-year-old too, and so a lot of what I do is spurred on by the future of our children. And so this work was born. It's a new initiative by the provincial government that started a couple of years ago when we're in a very high labor demand crisis and increased competition being seen everywhere. Companies were at capacity, and the government was concerned about small, medium-sized enterprises being able to compete and continue to be competitive in this environment. Well, no need to tell you that even in the downturn, this work became even more important as we try to look at what the critical components are of productivity. So I'm going to tell you very quickly what productivity is, and what we're learning about productivity and what we're trying to do to tackle some of the challenges that our small and medium-sized enterprises are facing. And hopefully that'll resonate with some of the firms that are in the room that are creating new inventions, new innovation, new solutions for a lot of our producing firms. So Productivity Alberta is really meant to be an umbrella organization connecting tools and services, and it connects to private sector organizations as well as private sector offerings to Alberta companies in the goods producing sector. At a very high level, productivity is the measure of output for one unit of input. It's measured in a whole bunch of different ways. Mostly labor productivity is the most common, but we are really concerned that it's really about using all of our valuable resources in the most effective and efficient way possible. So it's our people resources, our natural resources, and our knowledge resources. You know, the misnomer out there about making people work harder, it's really all about working smarter. If you were going to boil down productivity a little bit more in a more educated way, it's really looking at our prosperity, which is your GDP per capita, is really made up of two components. One's the whole labor effort, and as you'll know, being in Alberta, we've pretty much maxed out that side of the equation. We have people working the longest amount of hours. We tap into the most diverse groups of labor that you can in the province. We work the longest hours in Canada, in Alberta. And so it's time to look at the other side of the equation, which is the productivity side. And if you're going to increase productivity growth, you either look at efficiencies within your operations or you add, how can I add value to the products and services that I'm providing? So Alberta's boasted for years that we are the leaders in productivity. But unfortunately, that's a little bit of a misnomer because our energy sector is really driving that. So if you're looking at straight labor productivity, so that's the people side, we have a very high energy, it's called a barrel per oil, and when the price is high and the capital investment that goes into that, it makes our labor productivity stats look very high. So what we did is we said, well, what do we look like year after year for productivity growth? And you'll see that we fell to the bottom of Canada in year after year productivity growth, which was quite alarming to us. So we started talking to businesses across Alberta. We also worked with StatsCan to look at what are some of the numeric indicators, and we found there's the energy side plays a role in this in two different ways. When we're producing that high barrel of price for oil, our numbers look very good and we're very productive when we're producing. Right now we're back in a bit of a construction phase, and so we've got a lot more people effort, we've got a lot more capital effort, and so a lot of that sector is not yet productive, but will be coming on in the next couple of years. The other thing that we found is that worker tool time on these major projects is very poor. So a lot of that comes from the construction mega project side, where you've got lots of labor very tied up in these expansive projects, but they're waiting for materials to arrive, or they're waiting for the specs to be redefined. A lot of lost productivity there. And lots of labor challenges. As you know, we've had a revolving door around labor, and keeping up with training has been terrible. Unfortunately, Albertans are not so good, or our employers are not so good investing in their people. When we were seeing a lot of churn in labor, employers were saying, well, why would I invest in training that person when I don't know if they're going to stay? And I used to say back to them, what if you don't invest in them and they do stay? I don't know how that's going to help their business into the future. So now that we're in that economic downturn, what do you think is the first line item that goes? Next up, usually, your R&D spending goes a little bit lower too, but your investment in people goes down again. So The real important ones are those last couple, is that we have very poor operation and production processes for our manufacturing firms and processing firms. Very low investment in new equipment and in automation. Very slow adoption of new processes and technologies. All the amazing stuff that we've heard about it today. Alberta manufacturers and processors are very poor in even adopting existing technology. Alberta rates lowest in Canada for even even adoption of existing technologies. We have the most computers per capita in Alberta, but we don't use them well within our businesses, which is, another concern. Unfortunately, our management capacity and capability within a lot of these firms are also very poor, very weak, and we're trying to look for innovative ways to infuse higher levels of management competencies there. Well, we looked at some Canadian stats too, just to tell you. I'm going to just go through this really, really fast. But again, Canada pairs the U.S. similar to how Alberta, is playing within the Canadian landscape. And so you'll see that labor productivity growth rate on the red. We continue to lag behind the U.S. But you'll see the capital deepening. Our capital investment is quite high, and again, that'll be energy components that's driving that. But the bottom one, multi-factor productivity growth, if you see that one there, that's the one that has really got our attention. Multi-factor productivity are all those things that is not associated with the labor side or the capital investment. So to give you an anecdotal story and why this is a little bit difficult to measure when we start to look at the multi-factor productivity stats, it's kind of like when the rail companies start to double stack containers. Not a huge capital investment, some adjustment maybe to some tunnels, not a huge investment in people significantly, but you double your throughput of product from point A to point B. So that was a huge change in multi-factor productivity for the rail companies. Retail outlets, they say that putting a drive-through window in a retail operation can actually double or triple your throughput through a retail operation, and yet you're not adding significant expense in capital costs or, again, in the people. It's redesigning your processes. And third, if you look at your iPod, and as everyone has 2 or 3, that was existing technology repackaged in a different way, connected to music sources in a totally different way that revolutionized the world for now. And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about multi-factor productivity. So with Productivity Alberta, what we've been trying to focus on is how do we help our companies start to think that way. We've got lots, and we've heard lots today about technology invention and new development and amazing new technologies, but how do we increase the receptive side of that equation with the manufacturers and processors? So we try to focus on market extension, and we heard some really interesting ideas from Sherry today as to how they're looking at getting those pulse crops through awareness, but looking at applications through different marketplaces. We're helping companies look at their business models. How can they reinvent how they're doing their business, kind of like the iPod idea. We focus a lot on process improvement. How do we help companies understand their processes so that they can look for efficiencies and looking at how they're actually adding value to their clients? And we help them look at system solutions. So how are they tying ICT to their overall processes? How are they communicating up and down their supply chains? And then continually looking at their product improvement and integration.